r/AskReddit. Dear Reddit, what is the most WTF thing a friend or relative has done? My brother molested my daughter when she was a child. When I told my parents what he did, and that he admitted it to me when I confronted him, and that he also admitted to still being sick and liking kids now about 15 years later, their reaction was to take his side and blame it all on my daughter. She was 6 to 8 years old at the time, and he was 18 to 20. They also blamed me for destroying his life because we reported it to the police, although as I told them, the alternative is to kill him. Now my parents won't ever speak to me or my daughter again. I guess it is all just one big WTF on so many levels. The case is still ongoing, as I just found out a few weeks ago, and all the drama happened after that. My father was horribly sick in hospital with heart failure a couple of years ago. My sister's, now ex-fiancé, said to me on the bright side, the quicker he goes the more inheritance we get. Never in my life have I felt more hate for a single person. This reminds me of when my nan died. She was the nun we all loved. She'd been battling cancer for about a year, but things had taken a nasty turn overnight. The adults got a call to go to the hospital, so my older brother, in his mid-20s, and his girlfriend came to babysit me and my cousin, 10 and 12 respectively. Funny thing is, we were in the middle of a heatwave, rare for Britain. Everyone was suffering, but as a family we'd splashed out on this expensive new tower fan to keep my nan cool. It was an emotional night. We weren't getting any news, so we sat with music playing, trading stories of nan. At about 2:30 AM my brother gets a call and tries to explain the death to me and my cousin. We all try and hold it together. After a pause my brother says, "Do you think I can have her fan?" We laughed and then cried a lot. During my mother's final week as she was dying of cancer and in hospice, her mother and younger sister came to see her. Those two live in Florida in a trailer park, right next door to each other. We hadn't seen much of them in years. They spent the whole time she was dying complaining that my father was ruining their lives by asking that my aunt's young daughter not be allowed to run around screaming in the hospice center, and bitching that my mom, agnostic, wanted an Irish wake/memorial service instead of a Southern Baptist funeral. They accused my grieving dad of trying to keep them from seeing her, while simultaneously trying to get him to give them money. When my mom passed, we, by way of mom's wonderful older sister, called them to let them know it was time to say goodbye/the final viewing before she was cremated. We knew they were still in town, but they didn't answer the phone. Later they called back to say that they were sorry they missed the final viewing, but that they had gone to Armut instead. About 20 years ago I had a close friend. Over time we drifted apart as we moved around, but if we were ever in our hometown together we'd meet for a drink. He was a fairly competent person. He worked as a DB admin, so not what you would call stupid, except for one thing. His weird belief that he could cross any road without warning and cars were legally obliged to stop for him. Myself and his other friends would challenge him about this, and he would double down and state emphatically that the law requires vehicle drivers to give way to pedestrians. We'd argue, yes, that is true, but you are assuming they have the time and means to give way. Still, no amount of reasoning could change his mind. He did this all the time and somehow managed to never have an accident. Until 2 years ago, when he was killed crossing a dual carriageway that had a 70 miles per hour speed limit. When my sister was in the process of divorcing her husband because of a meth habit he refused to get help about, he suddenly developed fainting spells and fading vision that ended up with him being diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor and a short time to live. My sister let him come back home to be with the kids and generally felt like a shithead for kicking him out when he was so sick. Then she started noticing that his spells started happening when she was going to go out with her friends, or when she was going to do something that didn't involve him. On her birthday, her friends were going to throw her a surprise party that she never made it to because he fainted in the driveway and she had to take him to the hospital. She insisted on going into the ER with him, and while he was getting his MRI done, she asked the doctor on duty if the tumor could have grown more. The doctor replied, what tumor? Guy had been lying and faking cancer so that my sister would feel bad for him and not make him move out after they divorced. Told his kids he was dying and everything. Fuck that guy. Throwaway account. My mum's uncle is a pedophile, mother's brother not by marriage. Not only molested and raped her over a period of 6 years between the ages of 4 and 10, but also lied to the whole family, convinced them he was innocent despite being caught in the act with his hands down her pants by his wife, still married to her today. Police never involved and it all just got swept under the carpet. As long as I remember, there has always been a split in the family, with those who are on his side and those who believe my mum. Despite this, and here's their really WTF parts for me, everyone, both sides of the family, still got together for birthdays and other big events. This has curtailed in recent years and it's only big birthdays such as 40s, 50th, etc. What would happen is that each half of the family would sit on opposite sides of the bar, or in separate groups. There would be some funny looks and snide remarks. Why people just did not go, I have no idea. It's just how things were done. Not my but one of my father's best friends growing up was crazy into fitness during / after high school, eventually became a Army Green Beret / paratrooper, started a family, decided one day that he didn't want to live that life anymore, faked his own death by riding a bike off a bridge. Huge search party, nobody was found, but they considered him dead. Everyone in our small town is devastated, father is super upset, starts a double life. If I remember correctly, he found a recent kid that died in the area and took him name / identity, got married again, started another family, this time to a well-off doctor, started some kind of housing company, I think in the Bay Area. Total net worth of this new couple is 2 to 3 million. Got bored and started fooling around with his neighbor, ended up getting the neighbor pregnant. Second wife finds out, starts snooping around, find out his past as in fake mailboxes, figured out he borrowed the dead kid's identity and his traces back to his original life, the Green Beret. Second wife goes to her father, they go to the army. My father's buddy get found out by the army. Everyone freaks out, dead guy is back from the dead. He gets sentenced to like 3 years in army prison. Pretty much tells the army people that he could walk out of here if he wants to. 2 weeks later he escapes from army prison. While he's fleeing the police for 18ish days, he robs a bank. He eventually turns himself in. Gets 5 years in prison. Now he lives a normal life. My sister used to take one of my mum's car and pick up her friends and get drunk and drive around the small town we lived in. One night I was with my friends hanging out at these dirt bike jumps near the side of the street. These 2 girls that lived nearby that I knew weren't in good standings with my sister and her friends happened to be walking by. Now earlier my sister drove by and told me to get home because it was getting late. And the exact moment these 2 girls are walking by, I see my sister and her crew in my mum's car, a Yukon XL, coming down the street. So I spin off on my bike and go to hide in the bushes, thinking she's coming back to tell me to get my ass home again. As soon as I get to the bushes I'm waiting and I hear the engine rev high and I see the SUV swerve up into the grass and catch one of the girls like a deer in the headlights. I must have been 15 feet away hearing the impact and watching that girl get thrown into the higher grass and shrub. The SUV reversed as fast as it came and I darted on my bike home. My sister and her friends ended up ditching my mom's car near some family's barn on the other side of town. After everything, it turns out my sister let a friend drive and that girl made her own decision to target the 2 girls. I don't think anyone involved really got into much trouble in the outcome. The girl that got hit had a broken ankle and maybe some bad bruising. My aunt used to have this red 97 Ford Taurus. She would let my oldest cousin drive it and we would just run to the store or cruise around the block a few times. So this time we want to go to the gym and shoot hoops. I remember sitting in the back of the car with my cousin and we both lived in the next town over, and my oldest cousin driving and his brother in the passenger seat. Well, they had a younger brother who was hanging out with a foster kid my grandma took care of. and they thought it was cool to hang on to the windows while we backed out of the driveway and started down the street. Now my cousin's yelling at them to cut it out and go back home. So then he starts pressing the gas and speeding up, and they're running alongside still holding on. He gives it one good press and the car accelerates too quick for them to catch up, and I'm staring at this foster kid who's holding onto my window. As soon as my cousin accelerated, I see the kid's open mouth smile fall below the door and I feel the tire roll over his head like a speed bump. My eyes go wide and I look at my cousin sitting across from me, and the car's still rolling further, and we both turn and look out the back windshield, and we see the kid curled up on the ground screaming, crying, and holding his head. I watched that blood leak out onto the pavement for a quick second before my cousin panicked and stepped on the pedal. I'm still looking back at that kid while we turn the corner and head on down the road, finally stopping in the gym parking lot. I saw that kid a couple years later and got a good look at his scar that went from ear to ear when he walked past me. When I was about 14 and my sister was 19, she lived with my dad and I, on the condition she did washing and general cleaning and stuff. There was a weird smell coming from her room, so we checked on it. There was rubbish bags filled with rotting food, tons of clothes, bloody period stained sheets, maggots, and lots of weird sex story books about incest, etc. We ended up making a pile of our belongings about 1 meter high and 2 meter diameter for her to see when she got home. She went to her church and told them that my dad and I had been sexually abusing her. Oh, I forgot about the weirdest thing I found. She had a diary, and it was just 100% filled with lies. She wrote about all this abuse she was receiving, a boyfriend that didn't exist, a miscarriage followed by at a later date talking about losing her virginity. She is absolutely nuts, total compulsive liar, but also delusional to the point where she starts to believe her own lies. I now have nothing to do with her except awkward hellos at family events. My grandfather was never around when I was younger because he was in jail for pimping. When he got out, he impregnated a 19-year-old at the age of 58. The first time I met him was at my brother's funeral, where he got up to speak to say, "I'm a grandfather. I just wanted y'all to know that." As a way to get back at my mom for not putting his name in the obituary. Real low life. My uncle on my dad's side came to stay with us after he got out of prison for killing a guy back when he was in a gang. He had obviously been affected mentally while doing time, and he commonly said odd things with no filter. One time at dinner, he calmly and straight-faced recounted a time another inmate got into bed with him and kissed his neck and rubbed his body. Everyone had WTF looks around the table, and then we all tried to stifle laughter. My uncle sat there expressionless and stared straight ahead. I'm a bit late, but there's a few fucked up things that happened here. My mom's girlfriend of 10 years, we'll call her Ashley, passed away of a heart attack in the middle of the night in 2014. She had woken my mom up. My mom had started rubbing her back at her request, and then she just seized up, and my mom says the life just left her eyes. My mom immediately called 911 and performed CPR until the paramedics got there, but she passed away less than an hour later. For some background, this was before gay marriage was legal, but they had a good lawyer, and my mom had medical rights and rights to most of her possessions, though she gave most of the valuable possessions Ashley did own to her mom and sister. My mom is an executive at a large corporation that makes over $200,000 a year, and Ashley had worked odd jobs their whole relationship and was making around $12-13/hour at her factory job when she passed. WTF1. Ashley's sister called my mom 15 fucking times in the hours following her death, telling my mom that she had died of a brain aneurysm and that she needed to have them do an autopsy. According to the doctors that treated her, she died of a heart attack, and when asked specifically if it could been anything else, said, "Ma'am, we can do an autopsy if you would like, but it was a heart attack." Not to mention that Ashley was a heavy smoker and ate high-fat foods, and that she had requested her organs be donated if anything ever happened, which would not have been possible if there was an autopsy performed. My mom told the Gift of Life people to go ahead Ashley's sister would later communicate with Ashley via a medium, who told her that it was a brain aneurysm though. Go figure. WTF2. Ashley had apparently told her family 2 weeks before this that if she ever passed, her nieces, 5 of them, would be well taken care of. There was only one life insurance policy that would have been just enough to cover her funeral, but even that one wasn't valid because she had gone over a year, 14 months, without a physical. It's believed that she lied to stay in her mom's will, but it prompted her family to antagonize my mom for months about a life insurance policy that never existed. WTF3. Ashley's dad called my mom 2 weeks after the funeral and demanded to see a copy of the will because he didn't believe Ashley didn't leave him anything. This is the same dad who barely talked to Ashley at all throughout her childhood and adulthood alike, and who she had caught cheating on her mom and then her stepmom many times. I'm pretty sure there was more bad blood, but that's all I remember. My mom said, and I quote, "I assure you, she left you exactly what you're worth, nothing. My lawyer's name is In. She can get you the will. Go fuck yourself." Holy shit, where to begin? My stepfather held a SWAT team off with a butter knife for 9 hours because he refused to surrender and no one wanted to go into the trailer with the crazy ex-marine. My father got pissed at his girlfriend, threatened to empty several semi-auto rifles into her house. Cops found him nearby with said guns and a lot of ammo. My aunts fist fight at my grandfather's funeral. My mom beat the absolute shit out of my aunt after my aunt snapped at her one time too many, bounced her head off every countertop and cabinet door in the kitchen. My grandmother too parked on a cloverleaf on ramp with a semi coming, which missed us by about 6 inches. Grandfather 1, the one with the fist fighting daughters, committed tax fraud, let grandmother 1 take the fall with him when he was the only one involved. Grandfather 2 was a corrupt cop well before it was known that it could happen. Liked to take moonshine from illegal stills and consume the evidence. Also pursued a man onto a 2nd-story balcony and accidentally pushed him over the balcony. Dude left half his brain on the concrete below and never was quite the same again. Aunt that mother beat, abuser damned near anything that managed to find itself living on her property. Cousins 1 and 2 operated a drug distribution center out of Aunt that mother beat's house. Cousin 2 got nailed with 3 kilos of heroin, but avoided a lengthy prison sentence courtesy of a rehab program. No, it's a very long and complicated story. I'll try and tell it as succinctly as I can. Family has 2 daughters. They grow up. First one, let's call her Linda, left and pursued life elsewhere. The second, let's call her Rose, stayed and looked after their parents in their later years. When the parents die, the house is bequeathed to Rose. Rose already has a home nearby, so her 21-year-old daughter Myra and Myra's boyfriend move in. A little about Linda. She was my girlfriend at the time's mother, and one of the most selfish manipulative people I've ever met. Nonetheless, when she was diagnosed with terminal cancer around this time, everyone was shocked and upset, especially her children, some of whom were only in their early teens at the time. With only weeks now to live, she announced her dying wish was to live out the brief time she had left in this world in the house she had grown up in. Now she'd never had a close relationship with her sister, to the extent that my girlfriend and her siblings scarcely knew Rose or Maya. So we were getting all of our information via Linda. Apparently, Linda and her husband went to Rose, explained the situation, explained Linda only had weeks to live, said her only last wish was to die in the house she was born in. But Rose refused. Myra and her boyfriend would stay put. Linda painted Rose as cruel and uncaring, and Myra as this feckless 21-year-old harlot who was too busy shacking up with random dudes to give a damn about her dying aunt. As a consequence, Linda announced to her children they were going to have to sell their own home, buy a new one in Linda's hometown for to go and die in. And, of course, once Linda was gone, this house wouldn't be of much use to her widowed husband and children. So they'd have to sell up a second time and move back to a third property in their current town so the children could stay in school. This would mean buying and selling 3 properties in the space of a few months. Naturally, all of this was extremely upsetting for my girlfriend. She'd always had a difficult relationship with her mother, but that all changed now. She was angry with Rose and Maya for what they were putting her mother through in the final weeks of her life. She decided to drive to where they lived and give them a piece of her mind. Linda hadn't explicitly asked my girlfriend to do this, but I guessed she was encouraging her behind the scenes. Now this was my girlfriend's family, not mine. So I usually kept my opinions to myself. But on this occasion, I broke my rule. I privately begged my girlfriend not to do this, or at the very least, to find out the other side of the story before accusing anyone of anything. In a million years, I never suspected Linda was lying about her cancer. But, at the same time, something didn't quite smell right. Shit, this is long. I'll finish if anyone still gives a shit. Wow, didn't realize there was so much interest. Hope this isn't an anticlimax. The conclusion might not be what all of you are expecting, but I can only tell you the truth from my own perspective, and this is precisely that. Okay. As I said, I normally stayed out of things when it came to my girlfriend's family, and for good reason. I'd seen her family fuck her around so badly, and I'd often had to pick up the pieces myself. But she got mad as hell when anyone, even me, appeared to criticize them in any way. She wanted to know what I was implying. Honestly, I wasn't quite sure what I was implying. I just felt we'd only heard one side of the story. This did not go down well. Doors were slammed. Epithets were hurled. My girlfriend drove to see Rose and Maya. I wasn't a witness to what happened, but I guess she told them what she thought of them. I never really heard what they said back, but they didn't budge an inch. A couple of weeks passed. By now, I thought we'd be looking at alternative properties for Linda to buy, but that talk faded away. References to the progress of the illness also abated somewhat. Instead there was just more and more invective about Rose and Maya and what bitches slash skanks slash hoss they were. Then something completely random happened. I started out saying Linda was selfish and manipulative. Well, the apple doesn't fall from the tree. Abruptly, one day, my girlfriend announced our relationship was over. We'd been together since we were both 15. We'd been having problems, sure, but that wasn't the reason she was leaving me. Turned out she was moving in with some other guy, a guy I had literally never heard of in my life. Clearly, someone she'd been seeing behind my back. There were issues around our lease, moving our stuff, deciding who owned what. Her family got involved. It was ugly. In the middle of it all, I was presented with a chance to go traveling for a few months. I leaped at the opportunity. I was gone for about 4 months. The whole manner of my departure was very painful to me. I tried not to think of her. I put her out of my mind and never said her name. But we had enough friends in common. I knew I'd have heard if her mother died. Word never came. I returned home. Started a new life. Saw mutual friends occasionally. Word never came. Months turned to years. About 5 years after we split, she contacted me on Facebook. She asked me to meet her for a drink. I agreed. It felt good to see her after all this time. We reminisced. Eventually, I asked about her mother. She said her mother was fine. I said, wow, that's wonderful. She shrugged, like, I guess. I asked about the cancer. She said her mother didn't have cancer. I said, did it go away? She said no. Turned out she'd been misdiagnosed. I knew well enough not to delve too much. Jesus, I said. That's terrible. Is your mother going to sue the hospital for all the trauma they put her and all of you through? No, my ex replied, looking at the floor. She's not going to bother. It was obvious my ex-girlfriend was embarrassed. I could have pressed further, but I didn't. Yeah, I had warned her. She hadn't listened. But she had been deceived by her own mother about something that serious. I felt sorry for her. I also wondered why she wanted to meet me after all these years. That took a little longer to come out. One drink turned into very many. In the middle of the biggest construction booms in our country's history, she left me for a builder. Now boom had turned to bust. The guy she left me for was now unemployed, whereas my professional fortunes had improved. I was a published writer now, making reasonable money. The night culminated with her telling me she still loved me while she was waiting for a taxi. I pretended not to hear her, told her it was lovely to see her, and ushered her into the back seat of the cab. I never looked back. So my grandpa, father's side, was a pretty cool dude. When he suddenly died we were devastated. After his funeral, the whole family went to a restaurant, kinda normal here after a funeral. You know, sitting together, telling stories. Then I've overheard my aunt, dad bro's wife, I hope I'll get his merceds. Never in my life have I been that close to kicking a middle-aged woman in the face. Fucking disrespectful bitch. Have I mentioned that she was mean to everyone and treated grandpa like shit over the last couple of years? I don't wish people death, usually, and I don't believe in the concept of hell, but this fucking cunt makes me want a hell to exist and her rotting in it for eternity after a horrible death. Oh yeah, now I remember something to add to her cuntness and why she hated us so much. So our grandpa had this property. She asked for it, but he decided to give it to his niece, who's a really lovely person by the way, which made aunt flip out. She really didn't like that. Claimed she needed meds now because it upset her so much, and how our grandpa could make this horrible decision. But even before she wasn't a better person, she only ever gave a fuck about him when she needed something. Even typing this makes my blood pressure rise. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.